Welcome. In this explainer, we're jumping headfirst into a really tough spot, the kind of professional dilemma that can keep you up at night. We're talking about what happens when every single choice you have in front of you could end up causing some kind of harm. We're going to see how an ethical framework can help slice through the noise and find a way forward.
And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? This is the exact question that professionals, like Janita, who we're about to meet, have to face in these incredibly high-stakes situations. So what do you do when every path you could possibly take has a downside? How do you even begin to choose?
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to lay out the safeguarding dilemma and get to the bottom of the professional disagreement. Then, we'll listen to all the conflicting pressures coming from every direction. And finally, we'll bring in an ethical framework, utilitarianism, and see exactly how it helps Janita think through this absolute minefield.
Okay, let's get right into the situation. We're going to be walking in the shoes of a safeguarding lead named Janita. And believe me, she is facing a seriously difficult decision. So there are two key people at the center of this story. First, you've got Janita. She's pretty new to her role overseeing safeguarding for a whole trust of schools. And then there's Martin. He's a designated safeguarding lead, or DSL, at one of the schools. He's been doing this a long time, he's highly experienced, but Janita's been looking at his data, and she's starting to see a pattern that's making her a little uneasy.
Right, let's look at that data and the one specific incident that just brings this whole thing to a boil. This is where you can really see those professional opinions start to clash.
And wow, this chart really tells the story, doesn't it? You can see right here that Martin is referring children to social care 2.5 times more often than his colleagues across the trust. That's not a small difference, that's a really significant pattern. And here's the kicker. Because he's referring so often, a full 60% of his cases are closed with no further action by social care. Compare that to the trust average of just 35%. What this suggests is that his personal threshold for what's a serious risk might be quite different from the official one. So this all comes to a head with one specific case. Martin refers a student, Aliyah, because he's got a number of concerns. But the social care team, the MASH, they review all the information he sent and they decide, you know what, this doesn't actually meet the threshold to start a formal assessment. So here's what happens next. MASH says no. Martin fundamentally disagrees, so he decides he wants to use the official escalation process to challenge them. But he needs Janita's sign-off to do it. And the clock is absolutely ticking. She has just 48 hours to make a call, and either way, it's going to have big consequences.
Now, it's really important to get this. Janita isn't just making this decision based on data. She is feeling the pressure from all sides. And honestly, every single person has a valid point.
First, you have to understand where Martin is coming from. His entire approach is shaped by a past case where things were missed. So for him, it's simple. He would rather be wrong over and over again than risk missing that one child who desperately needs help. You can't argue with that passion. But then you've got the head teacher, and she's looking at the bigger system. She's worried that Martin is basically crying wolf. Her fear is that if they escalate every single concern, they'll damage their credibility with social care. And then, what happens when a truly life-threatening case comes along? Will anyone listen? And finally, there's the voice that so often gets drowned out in these debates, the families. Aliyah's mother found the whole experience intrusive, humiliating. It's a powerful reminder that these referrals aren't just paperwork. They have a real, immediate, and sometimes harmful impact on people's lives.
So Janita is stuck between a rock and a hard place. With all these competing voices, how can she possibly make the right call? Well, to get beyond just a gut feeling, she decides to use a formal ethical framework to help structure her thoughts. And the framework she chooses is utilitarianism. Now, the core idea here is actually pretty straightforward. It says the best, most ethical action is the one that creates the greatest amount of good for the greatest number of people. It's not about following strict rules. It's all about the consequences. You weigh the potential outcomes and pick the path that leads to the best overall result for everyone involved. Okay, so let's see how this actually works. This is where Janita sits down and tries to apply this theory to really map out the domino effect of each of her two choices.
And her choice is incredibly stark. It's black and white. Path A, back Martin and challenge social care. Path B, don't. There's really no middle ground. She has to pick one, and each choice is going to set off a completely different chain reaction.
So this table, this is basically Janita's utilitarian worksheet. Let's walk through it. If she supports the escalation, path A, the potential benefit is massive, but based on the data, unlikely.
Alia is protected from serious harm. The potential harms, though, are almost certain. She damages the relationship with social care, alienates the family, and undermines her other staff. Now, she doesn't support it, path B. The benefits are systemic, she keeps those relationships intact, and gets a chance to work with Martin to improve his judgment for all kids in the future. But the potential harm, well, it's catastrophic. If Martin is actually right this one time, Alia is left in danger.
So, after laying it all out like this, the utilitarian framework doesn't just hand her a neat, tidy answer on a silver platter. What it does instead is reveal the incredibly deep challenge that's sitting right at the core of her decision. And this, right here, is the ultimate dilemma. Utilitarianism forces her to weigh two totally different kinds of outcomes against each other. How on earth do you compare the small chance of a catastrophic outcome for one single child right now against the much bigger chance of causing gradual, systemic harm that affects many, many children over the long run? Which brings us right back to where we started, but with a much clearer picture of the stakes. This ethical framework gives Janita a structure for her thinking, but it can't remove the heavy burden of her professional judgment. So the question is left for all of us. When you're faced with this much uncertainty, do you go all in to protect the one, or do you make a difficult choice to protect the many? There's just no easy answer.